Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well, enjoying your summer day. If you have any questions or comments throughout the class, whether live or if you're watching it recorded later, please feel free to comment down below. We're going to get started. Behashkacha Pratis, by divine providence, today in Duluth was the Kids, Cops, and Cars program, where the Duluth Police Department brings out a lot of their special vehicles, and kids have the opportunity to check it out, and they have other games and shows for the kids. So this week's Torah portion is Parsha Shoftim, and the first words of the Torah portion, which we're going to focus on today, says, Shoftim v'shoitrim titin l'cha b'chol sharecha. Judges and law enforcement you shall set up in your gates, right? Meaning on all your cities and all your places, your settlements. So this week there's a mitzvah of the Torah that the Jewish people have to have policemen. So it's Bashkacha Pratis, by divine providence, that's the topic of our class and this week's Torah portion. So, so what is why do you have to have shoftim and shotrim? Why do you have to have both judges and police? So it's kind of obvious, but Rashi explains that you need judges to give the verdict. You need police officers to enforce the verdict of the judges. So that is how this week's Torah portion begins. And besides for law enforcement and judges, the Torah in this week's Torah portion also says that we need to have an army. So those are the different sections of the law that we have. So you have judges, you have law enforcement, and you have military. Military that defends the Jewish people from outside threats, as well as the police are the messengers of the court to fulfill the judgments. So now we're going to get into a story. Before we get the story, we're going to explain who the people in the story are. So the story involves Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Who was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Rabbi Judah the Prince. It says that there was nobody like him from Moses. He was a descendant of the Davidic dynasty of King David, and he was the leader of the Jewish people following the Bar Kokhba rebellion. The Bar Kokhba rebellion was after the destruction of the temple. There were some Jewish people who got together, led by a man named Shimon ben Koziba, and he was later renamed Bar Kokhba, the son of a star. And what he did was rebel against the Romans, Roman occupiers of the land of Israel, and it ended up being a disaster. And the Romans cracked down more than they already cracked down on the Jewish people. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi really came after that period where it was a very difficult time for the Jewish people. And it says that that since Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it was never Torah Gedula b'Makom Echad, Torah and greatness in one place. What do I mean by greatness? So obviously Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we're going to see in a second, was a tremendous rabbinic scholar, but he also was politically very connected. In fact, he had a very special relationship with the Roman Emperor Antoninus, as is called in the Aramaic. I have it written down here. What his Greek name exactly was: Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. Okay, so whatever his name was, this emperor he was very close with, and they had a personal relationship and would talk, and he would that way able to help the Jewish people immensely. He also became very wealthy. His estate controlled much land, eventually much land in the land of Israel, and supplied the Jewish people with much produce, wine, other flax, fish, fruit. So he became tremendously wealthy as well. However, what's unique about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, even though he had Torah scholarship and he was a political leader, as well as he was very wealthy, before he passed away, he said that even his small pinky never benefited from this world. In other words, he had a tremendous amount of wealth, and he had a tremendous amount of power, but he never benefited from this world. And he engaged in many fasts and piety and asceticism, I guess is the right word. But what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is most known for is his one of the most defining moments in Judaism, which was the compilation of the Mishnah. After the Torah was given, so the Torah is if you don't have the explanations for the Torah, right? How do you know what letter is Aleph? How do you know what letter is Beis? How do you know when there are a lot of things in the Torah that are not explained? For example, just as a small example, it says you should put a sign on your hand, which we know refers to tefillin. How do we know it refers to tefillin? We have a tradition that this is referring to tefillin. How do you make the tefillin? And all the different laws that come along with tefillin, many other laws of Shabbos, certain laws of kosher, all these traditions that are not explicit in the Torah are passed down from teacher to student. It's called the oral Torah, and this was at this time of the end of the second era period, already was starting to break, where there was no longer one Jewish leader. We already had at that time multiple Jewish leaders, and they started to be debates. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi realized that if he doesn't write down the Mishnah, if he doesn't write down these laws, it's going to be lost forever. And especially because of like we mentioned, the tremendous amount of persecution that Jewish people were receiving at that time. It was very difficult, and at times of persecution, it's very difficult to transmit Torah study. And you really want to look at the history of the Jewish people, and you want to see the levels of Torah study. Every time there's a big persecution of Jewish people, there's a real drop in the scholarship levels that you see time and time again. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi compiles the Mishnah. He says, okay, these are the valid opinions, and he brings multiple opinions, but it becomes clear who you're going to follow. You're going to follow the majority. You're going to follow certain rabbis in certain scenarios, other rabbis in other scenarios, and it becomes the basis eventually for the Talmud. The Talmud is kind of the tradition of breaking down the Mishnah, that you have a Mishnah, and okay, so now what is the implications of the Mishnah? What are the sources of the Mishnah? And that is what the Talmud is, and becomes the basis for the oral law to this day. So that is who Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was. So one time, during this period when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, was the leader of Jewish people, he decided to send messengers to the different communities of the Jewish people to find out what they need, what's going on with them, make sure they have everything they need spiritually, etc. So one time, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi arrived, here's the story, in a town, and they asked to be shown the guardians of the city. They said, where are the guardians of the city? So they showed them the police officers. They saw the law enforcement. They said, these are the guardians of the city. These people are the destroyers of the city. They explained that the true guardians of the city are the school teachers who teach children Torah. So here we are. We just explained that in this week's Torah portion, we have a mitzvah to create law enforcement, to execute the laws that are given down by the court. And here we have Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, who are both messengers of Rabbi Judah the Prince, who say that what? No, the guardians of the city, they're not the guardians of the city, they are the destroyers of the city. So what are we saying now? We should defund the police. That was the title of this video. That's the provocative title, right? And in today's society, or should we defund the police? Should we not defund the police? So maybe we have a source in the Torah that we should defund the police from the Talmud, the story. Or we said in this week's Torah portion, we said, Shoftim v'shotrim, you have to have both judges and law enforcement. So which one is it? What's going on here? There's got to be more to the story. And especially to the fact that this story is brought down in the Torah, in the Medrash to be specific, which is part of the oral Torah. So obviously there must be some sort of lesson for us. This isn't just a historical fact that Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi visited a place and said that law enforcement are the destroyers of the city. And we know that in Jewish thought as well, when we talk about a city, there's also an idea of the small city, that a person's own mind and soul is the battlefield of a small city between good and evil. So what does it mean that the true guardians of a city are not the people who guard the city physically, but the teachers of the Torah? So let's go into it a little more. So we know that there are certain things that Judaism requires us to do. One of them, as we mentioned, is right to have law enforcement. But another part of that is things that we have to do is we have to take seriously our lives. The Torah tells us, "V'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshosechem you shall watch very carefully your souls, your lives, that you have to be very cognizant of the fact that your life is given to you by God and is entrusted to your hands. And we have to be very careful not to do something to harm ourselves, because the Torah tells us that we have to be careful. So when a person is conducting themselves in such a way that making sure they're taking care of themselves, you have to have guards to the city, right? You have to have physical guards. But when they asked the people of the city, they said, "Who are the guards of the city?" They showed them these physical guards. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were taken aback by this idea, and they said that that this is obviously that you're putting your lives too much into into nature, too much into, okay, so we're going to take upon ourselves to make sure that we're physically okay. That to them was offensive. And the same thing applies when it comes to a person, the small city of a person's battlefield for good and evil, in a personal way. That what if a person is going to take seriously their health and their wealth and all the things that Torah tells us we have to take care of ourselves, right? We have to be financially independent. That's a mitzvah in the Torah. We have to be healthy, like we mentioned. Obviously on a personal level as well. A person has to eat healthy. A person has to exercise to make sure they're physically well. But the problem is, if a person comes and says, "Well, this is what's really important to me. It's really important to me to have." In the case of on a societal level, it's really important to me to have law enforcement. It's really important for me on a personal level. It's really important for me to exercise. It's really important for me to have a 401k plan. It's really important for me to have a certain amount of savings in the bank. It's really important for me to eat healthy and eat only certain diets, etc. And this is what I'm putting my faith in. That's the problem. That's when it becomes that itself could become not just that it's not the guardian, it's not protecting you, it actually becomes harmful. And we see this in reality, that if you put your faith too much and you don't put your morality first, and that's the top line, what could end up happening is just the opposite, is that could become the downfall of a society. For example, let's just look at a society not too long ago, Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany was a place that they took law enforcement very seriously. It became a militaristic society. But they put their morals aside and they put their faith in themselves. This isn't a psychological breakdown of German society in the 1930s, but in a very small part of it, at least, we saw how a society without morals could totally break down, even though they had law enforcement, even though they had a judicial system and a military and all the things that they need, and they were very into their personal health and personal hygiene and finances, and this was all things that they were cared about. But because their morality was put to the side, we see a total breakdown of society. And the same thing applies on a personal level. If a person, instead of putting their faith in saying, okay, well, I need to focus on my Torah, and of course you have to eat healthy and you have to exercise and you have to have a savings account and all the things that we have to do. But if you put your faith in it, what ends up happening is that we see a breakdown and we start to worship those things, essentially, right? We say, okay, this is what's so important to me. You know what's more important to me than having a Jewish education is having a savings account. And God forbid a person will not give his child a Jewish education because they say, you know what, it's too expensive, or they won't keep Shabbat because they say I can't afford to take off on Saturday. So these are the kind of things that we see, that not only can these things become not the guardians, but the destroyers. That is what we see from this story of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi's messengers, that they saw the downfall of a society was a society that said, this is what's really important to us. Having law enforcement, having military, all the things that, of course, that we need. But if this is what we worship, if this is what our high bar of society is, you're going to see a downfall. And the same thing, like we said, happens on a personal level. Now, what we also see from this idea is that these spiritual things are intertwined with the physical. In other words, that we see that by having these, it wasn't that they were saying, okay, this worshiping these ideas of law enforcement and militarism and personal finance and personal health, all these things, if you worship those things, they become bad. We also see is that actually what they were saying is that becomes the guardian of our health. That becomes the guardian of a society. If we put the morals in, we put our spirituality on the top, that actually will become a protector for us. So if we go to a story of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, we'll actually, we could actually see these kind of stories that actually happened to him. There was a king, the last Parthian king, his name was Artaban. He once sent Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, like we mentioned, he was a very powerful political leader in the Jewish people. He sent him a precious gem. So as a return gift, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi sent him a mezuzah. Now, for all of us who know how much a mezuzah costs, even the most expensive of the mezuzah is not very expensive at all, maybe $100. That's a really expensive one. Most mezuzahs are about $50 in today's inflationary rate. But a few years ago, we could have got one for $40. It's not a very expensive item. So this king was very insulted that he sent Rabbi Yehuda Anasi a precious gem, and Rabbi Yehuda Anasi sends him back a mezuzah. So Rabbi Yehuda Anasi said, you sent me a gift that I have to watch over. I have to have security in my house in order to make sure nobody takes this gift. I gave you a gift that actually watches over you. Like it says in the Torah, in Proverbs, it will guide you when you travel, it will guard you when you sleep. So I sent you something that guards you. Actually, my gift is greater than you. So we see here that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was saying that a mitzvah could actually guard a person, right? That it's not enough. It's not just that this is what's important in life, but actually it could physically take care of you as well. Another story about Rabbi Yehuda Anasi is brought in the Talmud that once Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, when he was, there was a calf being led to the slaughter, and the calf refused to go. So Rabbi Yehuda Anasi told the calf, this is why you were created. You were created in order to somebody should slaughter you and benefit from your in a spiritual way, whether it's for a sacrifice in the temple or whether it's for Shabbat or Yom Tov to have a delicious meal. In this way, you'll be serving God. This is your purpose for why you're created. So God says in the heavens, they decreed that because he was not compassionate, even though he was correct, but he wasn't compassionate. Again, we know that righteous people are judged on a very high level. It's kind of like when you have a white carpet, every single stain stands out. So he said he wasn't compassionate, you're going to suffer. And he actually had tremendous pain, I believe in his teeth for many years. And he did a lot of tshuva, a lot of repentance on this idea. And eventually, when he was in his older age, maybe 20 years later, I believe it was, many years later, whatever it was, he saw his housekeeper was sweeping up some weasels to throw away, and he said, "Leave them be." And the heaven said, "You were compassionate; we will be compassionate to you." And the pains in his teeth stopped. So again, we see Rabbi Yehuda Anasi himself had this idea that the spiritual morality that he had actually led to taking care of his physical needs. Right? That because he was compassionate, God was compassionate to him, and his pain subsided. Another thing, and more recently, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about a lot this idea about how many times when people would ask the Lubavitcher Rebbe for advice about their livelihood or other things, his answers were to increase in their spiritual ideas. We'll look at some examples below. So one thing that the Rebbe spoke about was that by studying sections of Torah, a person will increase their livelihood. The Rebbe said that a common mistake people make is thinking that the physical and spiritual are separate realms. In a very subtle way, this is contrary to belief in God, because God is one in both the spiritual and physical realms. As a result, when business isn't going well, many people only look to make improvements to the business itself, and they don't consider that it may be necessary to add something in the realm of Torah and mitzvahs. So we see this fundamental teaching of the Rebbe that it's really important that if something is not going right in our material lives, that we can't just take a material approach. We have to take a spiritual approach as well, because that is kind of the behind the scenes. That's what's really going on, and will improve our business as well. Again, in another letter, the Rebbe spoke about how charity is another way to improve one's business. In another letter, the Rebbe spoke about how marital harmony is important to a person's business, and the Rebbe said that marital harmony is related to earning a livelihood, as is indicated in the Mishnah. So the Rebbe said that if this person wants to is having issues financially, then he has to look to his own marriage and make sure he improves his marriage in order to make sure that he is worthy of receiving the blessings of a good livelihood as well. In fact, related to this, it says with this mission that the Rebbe is referring to is Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta said, God found no vessel that could contain blessing for Israel other than peace. So we see here that peace in the home, specifically in our conversation, is a very important component to a person's material well-being, is make sure that in his own life he has peace in his home, and that is what is going to bring blessing, in this case material blessing, to his home. The Rabbi also spoke about times the Rabbi gave advice about putting on tefillin in order to help people who were struggling with their mental health. A person who had an issue with his eyesight, the Rabbi said that a person should only look at somebody with a positive eye. That was the solution. Other health issues that the Rebbe addressed, said a person had some, I believe, stomach ailment, and the Rebbe said that he should make sure his kashrut, the keeping of kosher, is something that impacts the person's health. Quite obviously, as the saying goes, you are what you eat. So obviously, the person's not just the physical aspects and nutritional aspects of the food, but as well as the spiritual aspects of the food have an effect on the person. So, in summation, we could say that we see here this idea that it's not enough that we have all the things that we need. There are many things in life that we need. We need, like we said, whether on it's a personal level or on a societal level, we need law enforcement. We need health. We have health things that we have to be cognizant of. We have to, take care of diet and exercise and other societal, whatever the societal ails are. All these things have to be dealt with. But the question is, what is the moral response that we have? What is what does God want from us in this moment? God wants us to realize that the spirituality has an impact. It's not enough that we just do the things that we have to do. But what is the morals that we're transmitting through these things? Because if we just have the things themselves, we just have the law enforcement, we just have the exercise, we just have the dieting, we just have the financial advice without morality, and we worship those things itself, that is our downfall, and as well as the downfall of society itself. So we want to wish everybody in this Parsha Shoftim a wonderful Shabbos ahead, and we'll see you next week, God willing.